Folks, whenever they say there's no evidence, they're always either fudging it, lying, or they just don't know any better. For weeks now, the evidence has been accumulating. You've seen this probably by now. Look, I don't know exactly what's happening here. Governor Kemp himself, though, said this is troubling. And we have this new thing where a USB drive seems to be surreptitiously handed off to one of the poll workers. All of this stuff deserves more investigation. But look, there's stuff there to look at. And the media, when they tell you, oh, no, nothing is here and all this stuff is false, they do not have the technical expertise to say that, to know that. They aren't even looking into it. But fortunately, the right people are, and I still believe that this could break our way. Actually, I think it's going to break our way, but we'll see. All right, it is Friday, and a little bit of a week in review, if you don't mind. Week started with that mysterious injury, Joe playing with his dog, and somehow he breaks his foot. Well, he had a very friendly interview on CNN, and Joe finally told the whole story.
What happened was I got out of the shower, I got a dog, and anybody's been around my house knows, little pup dropped a ball in front of me, and for me to grab the ball, and I'm walking through this little alleyway to get to the bedroom, and I grabbed the ball like this, and he ran, and I was joking, running after him to grab his tail, and what happened was that he slid on a throw rug, and I tripped on the rug he slid on. That's what happened.
Oh, man.
Not very exciting story.
Is he crazy? That's the most exciting thing I've ever heard. There's a lot going on in that story. I don't think Joe realizes what he just said there. It's pretty fantastic if it really went down that way. I want to go through this. Everything he just said. There's a lot of weirdness in there, of course. Hey, it's Joe Biden. Why wouldn't there be? So, shall we? One more time, what we just saw, but broken down a little bit. Go.
I got out of the shower, I got a dog, and anybody's been around my house knows.
It's just so weird right there. Anybody who's been around his house knows. Who's been around his house? And by the way, even when you're friends with somebody, you don't go upstairs to the master bedroom. You know, you don't know the layout and the land. Anyway, that's weird right there. All right, keep going.
The little pup dropped a ball in front of me, and for me to grab the ball, and I'm walking through this little alleyway to get to the bedroom.
The alleyway to get to the bedroom. I know the best. I've seen pictures of Joe's house. It doesn't look like it has an alleyway. And also, I don't mean to quibble here, but he said little pup. I've seen the dog. It's a great big German Shepherd named Major. This is not a little pup. All right, Joe, something's fishy here. I know you're making it fishier. Keep going.
I grabbed the ball like this, and he ran, and I was joking, running after him to grab his tail.
Joking and grabbing the dog's tail. Joe, if this is true, that's akin to animal abuse. I'm a dog lover. I grew up with a dog. You don't, I mean, nobody but a 4-year-old would grab a dog's tail and pull on it. That's not what people do. All right, I think we've got one more.
And what happened was that he slid on a throw rug, and I tripped on the rug he slid on. That's what happened.
Tripped on the rug, you said. I did see this in a movie once. Maybe you did too. It's an oldie, 1989. Tom Hanks, Turner and Hooch. Something like this.
Oh, hey, boy, guess what? It's time for a bath. Come on, come on, come on. Come for a bath. Good go.
All right, you get the picture. All right, it's too fantastic. Although, I will say this, the pulling the dog's tail, that actually rings true. You're not supposed to pull on a dog's tail, but think of it this way. Joe, this is how he touches women that he does not know. This woman, Joe had never met before, and he's like getting really, really close. So if he'll do that to a stranger, what will he do to a dog that he actually owns? Pulling on his tail is probably, who knows, the least of it. All right. Pretty eventful, colorful story. Who knows what really happened? In the meantime, we're hearing that Joe Biden will be retaining Dr. Fauci, actually elevating him. He's going to be like the chief medical advisor to the president. And isn't that something? Isn't that something? He's going to, after all the criticism he has put on Donald Trump and how he's handled the coronavirus, he is going with one of the top advisors on the coronavirus, who's been involved in all this stuff since the very beginning. And here is Joe's great big new bold command.
The first day I'm inaugurated to say I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days.
Joe is so incredibly out of touch. We have been wearing masks for months and months and months. You see it every time you go out. Everyone's wearing a mask. Joe somehow, because he's been in this cocoon for so long, thinks that this is innovative. This is some sort of a new suggestion. It's not. It's not. And by the way, this guy Fauci that the Democrats are so enamored with, the only reason why they really like him is there seems to be a little tension between Fauci and Trump that makes him a hero in their mind. Fauci's been all over the place on masks. People forget this. And maybe the masks don't work as well as, well, the folks in the media say they do.
It's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
How about that, huh? You know, everyone's wearing a mask, but the cases are still with us and they're even going up. And Dr. Fauci right there is talking about the unintended consequences. But now it's just wear a mask, wear a mask. And it gets pretty nasty out there about this mask stuff. And I'll point this out one more time, that Dr. Fauci said on this show back in January, his message was, coronavirus, you don't have to worry about it. Manageable numbers. Bottom line, we don't have to worry about this one, right?
Well, obviously you need to take it seriously and do the kinds of things that the CDC and the Department of Homeland Security are doing. But this is not a major threat for the people in the United States, and this is not something that the citizens of the United States right now should be worried about.
In January, if we knew that we'd have to shut down the economy for months and months and months, you have been worried. I would have been worried, right? And what they were doing back then, what he was talking about, they were checking the temperatures of people coming in from Wuhan, China. Just Wuhan, not every place in China, at certain airports. They weren't doing all that much. But again, this is the hero of the left and the person that Joe Biden wants to keep around in his administration, which, by the way, I still don't think is going to happen. I really don't. Meanwhile, he's doing the things that you do when you say you're the president-elect. So you sit for friendly interviews. And again, with CNN, he sat down with Jake and Kamala Harris and made this rather bizarre promise. If he ever disagrees with Kamala Harris, this is what's going to happen.
And like I told Barack, if I reach something where there's a fundamental disagreement we have based on a moral principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign.
I just kind of weird. And every time he was talking, by the way, Kamala looked like she was a little bit impatient. You know, she kind of like gritted her teeth and just like looked at him with a little bit too much favor in her eyes, like she was forcing it. Because let's face it, we all know that deep down they probably don't like each other. I mean, those debates, she was really nasty with him. She was trying to not just beat him in a debate, but decapitate him politically. Remember this?
It was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. You know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools, and she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
That was quite a moment, and a lot of folks thought that she just annihilated Joe Biden that night and really humiliated him. But anyway, politics, yeah, you know, you brush things under the rug and you form alliances of convenience, and that's what this looks like right now. I got to say this about the Supreme Court. Do they have the guts? I hope they do. Look, a lot of these matters regarding the election will ultimately probably wind up before the Supreme Court. And I've been hearing this a lot lately from folks who know these kinds of things, that the Supreme Court is most concerned about the Supreme Court, their reputation, their families even, you know, how people will perceive them. Controversy goes with the job, but they don't necessarily want too much controversy. They may just not want to get involved in any of this, get their hands dirty. I hope they're up to it. I really do. There was one important time in history where they weren't. The Dred Scott decision. I heard this from a guy named Jake Novak, reminded me that, okay, so Dred Scott was born a slave, but he escaped to the North and free territory, and he sued to be declared a free man. The matter ultimately went to the Supreme Court, and they saw some merit in what he was talking about, but in the end, they said, sorry, you're still a slave, because if we make you a free man, well, that could have implications throughout the entire country, and that's a big, complicated mess that we don't want to get into, so we're just going to say you're still a slave. And of course, there was a big, complicated mess that followed anyway, known as the Civil War. They should have been on the right side of history, that Supreme Court. I hope these folks will be as well. Folks, stay with us. We're joined by Colonel Phil Waldron. Have you heard about him? He's amazing. He should be household name famous, but he's not, because he favors Donald Trump. He's a technical expert, and he's been finding all kinds of serious problems in the election. He's been testifying before state legislatures across the country. Colonel Waldron joins us next.
How do we call a liberal? You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Those reporting, you know, the fractional voting is there. It's not a whole number. Again, if there are 10 people, you cast 10 ballots. You know, the sum of the whatever candidates are voted for should equal 10, and not, you know, 2.87 for one, 3.13 for the other, and 4 for the third candidate. It should all, you know, equal whole numbers.
That's Colonel Phil Waldron, U.S. Army retired. We mentioned this last night. Sometimes it doesn't sound like CSI Miami, but this is dynamite stuff. He's been crisscrossing the country with Rudy Giuliani, making the case about serious flaws in this election. He is an information warfare expert and has been doing a great job. Colonel Waldron, welcome to Newsmax. How are you tonight?
Thanks, Greg. Fine. How are you?
Terrific. All right. A couple of things, sir. You have been making this case. Number one, do you think you're getting through? These folks are asking you questions. A lot of them are technical amateurs. Do you think you're making headway? You know about the severe problems on election night. We'll get to those in a moment. But with the key audiences, those lawmakers, are you penetrating?
They are asking a lot of questions, and then after the meetings, their reaction is pretty shocked. It's a broad spectrum, a broad spectrum attack. And once they start to realize what's really happening to the American public, they're shocked.
Who could be coordinating? If it is broad, and it seems to be, this would be massive, or maybe not so massive. I mean, we've all seen one hacker can bring an entire country to its knees. So even though it was broad, it could have been done by a very small number of people. Could you tell us a little bit about that, where it originated at this point, in your opinion?
So I'll just stick with what I know for a fact right now. We are still uncovering things day by day. We really started working on this Dominion issue as the election came out. We started studying this problem back in August, and many on our team have been looking at it for the past 2 years. But there's a core of people who are involved with Dominion, with SGO Smartmatic, and the problems exist throughout the other election systems as well, ES&S. There was actually Stacey Abrams and several other Democratic senators and Congress persons had complained about ES&S as well. So all of these systems have a common core of software. They'll try to convince you that they don't, but they have business license and software licensing agreements. They have shared offices. Dominion is a Canadian/Serbian company. They've got servers all around the world, and their office in Toronto is on the same floor as the Open Societies Foundation office. I can tell you from my work in network analysis, in terrorist networks, IED maker networks, there are commonalities and communication coordination and synchronization with the standard things that we're observing in all of these battleground states, and even some that the public is not looking at right now. Virginia, New Mexico, there are a lot of other areas where these patterns are popping up.
Colonel, I want to go through this. You made an observation even before the election about who was watching the conventions, RNC, DNC. I want to go through this here. You've assessed the live streams. Looking at the 4 nights of the DNC versus the RNC, the DNC had 6.96 million viewers over the course of 4 nights with 800 plus live streams. The post-RNC, let's see here, they had 12 million live streams with 106.5 million viewers. Now, we're not really just talking TV ratings here. These numbers mean something even much bigger than that. What do they tell you?
So we do a lot of different things to measure sentiment among the populace, either social media through deep textual analysis, looking at the actual words in text for articles, in social media posts, and analyze the level of either hostility or positivity in these texts. So what this one parameter did was give us a true measure of engagement. And the fact that there was, over the 4 nights of the cumulative 4 nights of the DNC convention, if you'd listened to the mainstream media, you would have thought that there were more viewers for the Democratic National Convention than the Republican National Convention. But people consume their news differently nowadays. The Nielsen ratings don't really mean anything because people consume news through their phones or iPads, through live streaming TV. So we looked at the differences, and a 99.5 million viewer difference over the 4 nighs aggregate was significant. And we also looked at, I think, 11 events from Vice President Biden and 13 events for current President Trump post-convention, and there was a 49-fold greater viewership for the Trump events on live streaming. And this is using patented technology that captures the universe of live streaming events.
And that would tell you that much more enthusiasm for Donald Trump. I do want to show you the video. You've seen this already from Georgia, the USB handoff. Can you tell us what might have been going on in this sequence? A handoff, it looks like they're doing it again surreptitiously. What do you make of it? What does it look like to you?
So the USB drives are used for a lot of different things. So they hold the crypto key for the machines, which is the cryptology, but they also will hold votes. And there have been several other videos showing people, workers, removing a USB drive from the voting system, plugging it into a laptop, manipulating the data somehow, and then putting it back in the voting machine. These are votes. All of our classified systems in the military, and even a lot of the unclassified systems, they've got the USB ports totally inactivated, because there's a realization of the vulnerabilities that transferring data, especially classified data, which voting information is defined as part of our national critical infrastructure. We've seen incidences in Pennsylvania where USBs in a laptop were stolen from an election warehouse 30 days prior to the election.
All right, Colonel, we're out of time, just about. A couple of quick questions. I want to reemphasize, sometimes we watch these things on TV. They're not necessarily compelling. They're on, and they're very, very technical, but you're in the room, and I know it can be very different inside the room. Your arguments, the details, they're making an impression on these lawmakers, correct?
Yes, they're listening and they're asking intelligent questions. The problem is that they've never been presented this information. They've been presented a narrative that these things are disconnected from the internet, which is not true. We had testimony in Georgia yesterday that one lady stood up her precinct voting machines and it was the wrong precinct. She called Dominion in Colorado, the help desk, and the help desk remotely accessed her tabulation machines and her voting pads and reset them to the right.
What's your next stop, Colonel? Where do you go next?
It just depends. I'm having a hard time keeping up with.
Yeah, I know. You've been on the road relentlessly with your wingman, Rudy Giuliani. You make a great team. Colonel Waldron, thank you very much for what you're doing, for being with us on Newsmax. To be continued, okay?
Thanks, Greg.
You bet. Safe travels indeed. Doing some great stuff there. All right, stay with us. You heard about the victory that people of faith had in California. Yeah, a big one. Stay with us. All right, let's take a look at that church in California, if we can, please. This is good stuff. 1 week after handing a major religious liberty victory to New York churches and synagogues, the U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday gave hope to California churches. The justices, in a one-page unsigned order, vacated a lower court ruling from September that had upheld California's restrictions on churches as part of a lawsuit filed by Harvest Church and Harvest International. The order vacated that decision against the church and remanded the case to the Court of Appeals. Let's see. I think we're getting closer and closer to people being able to worship the way they want to. Pastor Che Ahn joins us. He's the pastor of Harvest Rock Church in California, Pasadena, California. Welcome, Pastor, and congratulations. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on, Greg. What an honor.
Thank you very much, sir. The honor is ours as well. So tell us a little bit about where things stand right now, and when will it be something akin to business as usual for the church?
Well, we sued the governor in July when we felt discriminated against because, of course, the heart of the First Amendment is religious freedom and worship. And then the riots took place in Los Angeles, the tragic George Floyd's death. And so Newsom locked down the church in July, but in the meanwhile, he's saying to the rioters, you must exercise your First Amendment. We will protect you. And he even says, God bless you. And we're thinking to ourselves, what about our First Amendment rights? And when he locked down the church in July, it wasn't just a church, it was Bible studies, prayer meetings. You could not even meet in your home to worship if you had someone outside of your household attending with you. And you couldn't go over to someone's house and pray for them as a pastor if they had COVID-19. And so my attorney, Matt Staver, and he's done a tremendous job with Liberty Counsel, encouraged me to pray about suing Governor Newsom. And I did. With my board's approval. And so it's not just me, but I lead a network of churches. We're in 70 nations. but we have around 162 churches in California. And so our network called Harvest International Ministry with Harvest Rock Church sued Governor Newsom. When we sued him, we started to get hate mails and people were saying you're being selfish and you're killing your church, which is the first thing from the church, for the truth, because I love my church. And I've been a pastor now for 41 years. And I'm concerned about every aspect of our church's life, you know, not just the physical well-being, but the spiritual, emotional, mental well-being. And so in September, I got a letter from our city prosecutor here in Pasadena saying, if we continue to meet, they would arrest me. They would fine our church members $1,000 per person for each time they meet. And then they also said, we have the right to arrest your church members.
Pastor,
and that really impacted me.
And it obviously, to me, it's obviously anti-religion, possibly anti-Christianity. I know temples are affected by this as well. So it's anti-believer, because everything else that they're allowing, I don't see how they can justify signaling out communities of faith. This seems like you're targeted because you believe. Am I crazy?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, think about it. Abortion clinics are essential, and they were open. Liquor stores are essential, so they're open today. And marijuana dispensaries are open, but the church was deemed not essential. Well, I beg your pardon, but we've been essential for 2,000 years. And where would the world be without the word of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the local church? And so we appealed to Governor Newsom. We wrote a letter to him with 1,500 pastors signing off on the letter saying, please let us open because we are essential. But you know what? I think we're a threat to him. He knows that majority of evangelical believers voted for Trump. And this state has become so extremely left, progressively left. And we're a threat because, you know, they want to control everything, but they know they can't control the church, because Jesus is the head of the church. He's my Lord, and Newsom is not the head of this church. So Caesar really is not under us, not over us, but we are the ones to really be salt and light to government and politics and education, et cetera. Yeah. And so we sued, and then we got this letter that threatened to arrest our church members. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not in communist China, I'm not in North Korea, we're in the United States of America. And so my attorney asked for an emergency injunction to vacate that threat, and we lost in the district court. And now we went to the Supreme Court, and thank God for President Trump nominating and confirming 3 judges that are righteous and just, because they sided with us and said that the injunction was granted. And so now the threat of being arrested is over, and we can continue to now appeal. We're at the 9th Circuit. But, you know, the Supreme Court really laid out a roadmap for all of us and for the even the 9th Circuit and the lower courts. Because what happened in New York with the 5-4 decision right before Thanksgiving is really something to be thankful about. And I thank God again for a majority of constitutionalists that are on the court, and they're siding with the church and our First Amendment rights. And that's something to be very grateful for.
Pastor Che Ahn, appreciate it so much what you're doing. Check out the Harvest Rock Church in Pasadena, California. And
That's right.
Pastor, when I'm out there, and hopefully we'll be in the spring.
Why don't you come and preach for me, Greg? I would love to have you come.
Did you say preach for you? I can't.
Why not?
Me?
We need people in the media to speak from the pulpit.
All right, I will listen. I'm good at that. I can't get up there and preach. That's for you, Pastor. Appreciate it so much. I will see you in the spring. And many thanks indeed, sir.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. You bet. To be continued. And I look forward to that. All right, folks, we got some great historians. And by the way, Joe Biden, let's face it, that crazy story with the dog and the shower and the ball and the rug and the tail in the alleyway, it can't be true. It can't be. And if Joe was lying, lots of presidents lie when it comes to their health. Happens all the time throughout history. We'll have some examples when we come back.
happened was I got out of the shower. I got a dog, and anybody's been around my house knows, dropped a little pup, dropped a ball in front of me, and for me to grab the ball, and I'm walking through this little alleyway to get to the bedroom, and I grabbed the ball like this, and he ran, and I was joking, running after him to grab his tail, and what happened was that he slid on a throw rug, and I tripped on the rug he slid on. That's what happened.
Oh, man.
Not very exciting story.
It's the craziest, silliest, most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, actually, and I don't believe it. Sorry, but let's bring in the historians, and they'll tell us, I believe, that presidential candidates and presidents lie all the time about their health condition. We got Doug Weed, presidential historian, author of Inside Trump's White House, and Craig Shirley, Reagan biographer and presidential historian, Newsmax analyst. Welcome to you both. All right, Craig, first, your reaction to Joe Biden's Inspector Clouseau-like ridiculous tripping, falling, whatever the heck happened there.
I think it's a silly over-explanation. I think that there's probably a very simple reason why, but it may involve his age or something like this, but they want to cover it up and deter attention to the dog. You know, presidential health has been covered up from George Washington's teeth to Grover Cleveland getting a prosthetic jaw to remove the cancer he had, FDR in a wheelchair, which really is more complicated. It was more about being polite, not that people didn't know. People did know. But Eisenhower was actually the first president, his first proclamation as president, to announce that the American people would know in real time all of his health maladies. So when he had his heart attacks and his ileitis and his other problems, the American people knew in real time. But of course, they went back with John Kennedy. You know, he covered up his Addison's disease. He covered up his regular shots of cortisone and his many other maladies. So, but since that time, presidential health has been pretty much an open book. It's always a question of whether or not they tell the truth, though.
Yeah, you know, I heard you mentioned Kennedy and his Addison's disease. Doug Weed, did you hear this? That one of the reasons why Lyndon Johnson actually accepted the vice presidency is because he did the math. He did some calculations, and he figured that Kennedy did not have much longer to live. He didn't think he would die of an assassin's bullet, but he was thinking, Doug, that this guy's going to die of something because he's got like 10 things wrong with him.
You know, you're right on the money. I wrote the book, All the President's Children. There's a scene in my book where old Joe Kennedy is in a car and it's snowing outside and he's got the heater going and he's with a friend and they're looking out through the windshield looking at Jack Kennedy shaking hands with factory workers coming out of the factory. And Joe says to his buddy in the car, I never thought I'd see this in a million years. I always thought it would be Joe, who was the oldest son. I thought he was going to do this. Jack is too effeminate and too sickly. There's no way he could do this. So even his own father didn't think he was going to make it.
Wow. Effeminate, too. He did look very, very slight. Gentlemen, sorry, go ahead, Craig.
At the 1960 convention, LBJ was running around at Los Angeles, the Democratic convention, referring to John Kennedy as a cripple. So he didn't think it's Brother Weed, and you are absolutely right, is that LBJ didn't think that Kennedy would live out 8 years as president.
So let's go to one of our favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan. The assassination attempt shortly into his presidency in 1981. This is, wow, they're all kind of jumping on John Hinckley, and appropriately so. But I'm told, and I've read, that Mr. Reagan came much closer to death than was reported at the time, that this is something that he almost died from. And the injury that he sustained probably affected him for the rest of his life.
I don't know if it affected him. You know, he was pretty, you know, within several months, he was back into, you know, vim and verm and all that. But it's true that it really did. They didn't let out for a time, but it's not because there was a conspiracy to keep it covered, but because there was just so much disinformation flying around. For instance, Frank Reynolds of ABC went on national TV and reported that Jim Brady had died, which wasn't true. So there was a lot of disinformation. But Reagan, the devastator bullet, which didn't detonate, thank God, was 1 inch from his heart. He'd lost half the blood in his body. He was he'd almost gone into shock, and he was near death.
Wow. Craig, I'm sorry, the sound is breaking up and the music is playing. Frank Reynolds from ABC News reported that piece of fake news. I always liked him. I still like him. May he rest in peace, but I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, he's
we're
a
going
good
to
man.
follow. We'll have more on that, or I think I'm going to find out about that real soon, and I might tweet about it. We got to leave it there. Doug Weed, Craig Shirley, thank you very much. Folks, you heard about the headline from the Attorney General that no fraud, no fraud. Look at the fine print. And the media took a few shortcuts in reporting that story. We'll be back with expert analysis.
All I can say is that the fake news just doesn't get it, do they? They don't get it.
They don't get it, do they? And boy, oh boy, you see mistakes by the minute. Fortunately, though, we have Ken Timmerman, author of The Election Heist, Trump 2016 Foreign Policy Advisory Board member, and Nobel Peace Prize nominee in 2006. And he's been watching things very closely. Ken, welcome back to Newsmax. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Ken, a couple of things. Bill Barr seemed to come forward this week, seemed to indicate that no election fraud had been discovered. Nothing to see here, folks. Don't bother me. It's a little bit more nuanced and complicated than that, isn't it?
It is, and he was really quoted very parsimoniously by the media. They basically quoted two sentences or sentence fragments. He said, to date, they haven't found enough evidence that would overturn the election or change the outcome of the election. Now, that's probably true, but the real question is, do they have investigations underway? I happen to believe that they are doing some preliminary investigation, but if they had convened grand juries, which is what you do in a criminal case, right? If they convened grand juries, I guarantee you we would know it because the left would be screaming bloody murder. So this guy's got to step up to the plate and do his job. The FBI's got to step up to the plate and do their job.
Let me just make sure, though. We heard from Joe DeGeneva, and he said, look, he's speaking in a coded way to his own department. You know, he's got a massive deep state bureaucracy under him. He's a man who believes in the Constitution. He's just playing this the way he has to survive down there, and he's going to do the right thing. Is there any merit in that, or is this a deep stater who's got to be kicked a little bit to make things happen?
No, he's not a deep stater, but he is the Attorney General, and he does have the authority to give instructions, which he did, by the way, to all of the prosecutors around the country to look into these cases. We just haven't seen grand juries be convened yet. Look, the evidence, Greg, we've seen this. The American people have seen this. The viewers on Newsmax have seen this for a month. It's right before our eyes. We watch a Jesse Jacob in Detroit, or Patty McMurray, these women telling us that they're instructed to cheat by election workers, to backdate ballots, to enter people into the qualified voter rolls who aren't qualified voters. I mean, on and on and on. You have hundreds of people who give them these sworn affidavits. You have Gabriel Sterling, this elections manager or consultant, it's not quite clear, in Georgia, who's telling us, don't believe your lying eyes, that video that you've got up right there. Don't believe that video because those are really empty boxes and the ballots are being put back into those boxes is what he wanted us to believe. Well, you can see right on the video they're taking ballots out of the boxes. That should be investigated. The FBI should be going to other cities, Milwaukee and Detroit and Philadelphia, and getting the same kind of video and looking at it forensically, and then they should be identifying the people who are counting ballots in the dark after they've kicked out the Republican poll watchers. Who gave those orders? Who printed the ballots that were brought in by that truck driver, right? What was the printing company in Bethpage? Was it just 250,000 ballots? Was it 1 million ballots?
Yeah.
I mean, the threads for the FBI to pull are so numerous, it's not funny.
Ken, very quickly, if you don't mind, only have 15 seconds. The media, obviously, they're not covering this in a serious way. They're ignoring it, saying it's all nonsense. Does it really matter whether they care or not? Let's face it, they are so often historically wrong about everything. Their lack of focus, does it really mean as much as sometimes we make it out to me. Like, if they were focused more, it would be better, or maybe it's actually irrelevant.
Well, they're going to be in for a big shock if Trump wins all these lawsuits and becomes the second term, has a second term on January 20th, is inaugurated.
Well, yes, it will shock the world, and I think that's coming. I really do. Ken Timmerman, we appreciate it very, very much. And check out the book. Let's put that up one more time, please. The Election Heist. Perfectly titled. We'll get to that, and we'll see you soon. Okay, Ken?
All right. Where is Eric Coomer?
I'm sorry?
Where is Eric Coomer, the Dominion guy who is behind all of this?
Oh, good question. Good question indeed. We'll see you later, okay? All right, take care. Eric Coomer, yeah, that's certainly not a household name yet. Could be soon. We'll be right back. Folks, did you hear that China landed an unmanned probe on the moon this week? They did. And I actually think that's pretty cool. But I'm also seeing all these reports that, ooh, China is catching up on us technologically speaking. They may be making strides. And by the way, I'm deeply suspicious of the Chinese military and the Chinese government. Love the Chinese people. But let's pat ourselves on the back every now and then. They put a probe on the moon in 2020. We put people on the moon 50 years ago. This, by the way, is Apollo 17 blasting off on December 7th, 1972. That's this Monday. The only nighttime Apollo shot, manned Apollo shot. Spectacular. The crew, some of my favorites, Gene Cernan, Jack Schmitt, and Harold Evans. Take a look at this next picture. This is Gene Schmitt, who was a civilian astronaut. He was a geologist by training. Get this, 4 years after he gets back from the moon, he gets elected to the U.S. Senate, all by the age of 40. An amazing guy, and I got to meet him once. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Stand by for Stinchfield, and happy anniversary.